AggLife Fit Action. In relays, specifically the 4x100 meter track relay, you have the smallest margin of error for handoffs and actually the technique in which you run, because it's so quick. The whole race is mostly right around 37, 38 seconds, 39 seconds, not even 40 seconds on the pro level and on the Olympic level. But you can't fumble the baton. You can't do little things here and there that you can do in maybe the 4x400 meter, where you have a time to catch up. So Jamaica had dominated for years between like 2008 and 2016. I believe they still have the record with Usain Bolt and Johan Blake. But there was a time that they didn't have those two. And they had a catastrophic error. And it's labeled as probably the funniest relay ever. But it's I wouldn't call it the funniest. And it's an error that is very unusual. It was almost as if the person just wasn't paying attention and he allowed the person, the handoff, to run right past him. And it's unexplainable. So, I mean, people could say that maybe the crowd was too loud or any of those types of things, but this guy just wasn't watching. The exchanges on these relays, they are supposed to be perfect. In order to be perfect, that means you're not losing much speed as you're going around. A perfect exchange is there's no slacking at all in between changes. You're not running past them, which is sometimes considered a safe exchange when you're kind of side by side with them. You're not getting up that close to them. What you're doing is you're passing the baton in a way that the baton doesn't pause. It's constantly moving. And it's a conversation between those two, between the person handing it off and the person receiving it. But in this case, it was Jamaica running, early 2000s. And the guy, the second leg going to the third leg, the second leg, he ran right past the third leg. And that's not the third leg's fault. I mean, he has to be watching. You're supposed to look back, and when they're getting close, you listen. You listen for the signal to start running. And then you have to exchange within that exchange zone. There's an exchange zone of about 20 meters. And then there's an acceleration zone of 10 meters. But it's 30 meters total. That baton has to be exchanged. The baton itself has to move to the next person within that 20 meters. And you have to practice that. That's something that you constantly practice. In America, we've had problems, not in the last 4 years, but when you move to like 8 years and then going back. So let's say 2016 and then going all the way back to about 2000 or 2004, the United States was known for having faulty handoffs. They've dropped it. They've done a lot of different things. I believe run out of lanes, but the United States was having a tough time. But it seems like we've gotten that resolved pretty much, but it could happen at any time. There's communication because with the United States had a lot of different people, or had hands full of people that were top-notch runners, and they were coming from all over the world. They were traveling and doing all those types of things. They don't really master the 4x100, meaning like some of these other countries, they have particular runners that are running on that relay. They might put some fresh legs on the opening rounds, but most of those other countries don't have the leg to stand on, so to speak, in those early rounds, because you had Jamaica and you had the United States and you had Canada that was doing well. Great Britain did well, I believe, for a few years, but you see other ones coming up, like I believe Italy and France are doing well. Italy is really good. Italy did really good this year, if I remember correctly. I believe they were second, overall, and this is men's 4x100. So they are practicing the 4x100. That's what they do. And those relays, that's what they do. With America, they were taking runners, and what they would do is put runners that maybe qualified to go, and they weren't the best runners, but they were solid runners. They would put them in the opening rounds, especially in the first round, semifinals possibly also, but they would put them in the early rounds and then exchange in the finals. Once they made it to the finals, they would exchange for their top 4 runners. And that meant that a lot of times they didn't have the exchanges down. It's not enough just to know the technique of running the 4x100 meter. It's not enough just to know where you're positioned in your lane, going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 in the exchange. It's not enough for that. It's not enough just to know, hey, I'm coming in and I have to say stick. I have to say go and stick, or whatever the word is for them. We said go to start the run, and then we said stick for you to put your hand back and for you to exchange that handoff, exchange the baton. Whatever connection that is, you have to know that for each team, and you have to practice it, because there are different speeds of people coming in. And if you're changing the legs up on start, or some people call scratch, on the first leg, that's a great person that's out the blocks. They're great out the blocks, and that's a solid, they're running the curve. But then when you're exchanging the second leg and the fourth leg are the same, because they're straightaways, and then you have somebody running the curve on the third leg. So sometimes they will switch those people. We saw this year in the women's, I believe that for Jamaica, of course America won this year, but Jamaican women, actually they took Elaine Thompson-Herah off the second leg. She ran a great second leg, but they took her off the second leg for the final, and she didn't run in the finals. And if I'm correct, the fourth leg for the semifinal, which was Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, I believe they moved her from the fourth leg, which is a straightaway, to the second leg for the final. So in their fourth leg, they had Shericka Jackson, which was the 200-meter champion and second in the 100 this year for World Championships. So, of course, they were going to make those changes. It was a surprise for me to see Elaine Thompson-Herah moved off, but those were some other issues that I think that are going on within their camp. But those handoffs need to be as close to perfect as possible based on who you're running against. So for an 8-year stretch, the Jamaican women and the Jamaican men, actually 12-year stretch, the Jamaican men and women, you could not make any mistakes against them because they were top notch and they had the records. I think the Jamaican ladies still have a record also. And you could not make any mistakes. The margin of error was really small. So when you see these funny clips of these people coming up and doing different things, like you'll see China for the ladies. I did not remember this clip being this long. I've seen it before, but I was surprised that it was as long as what it was, because the Chinese ladies several years ago, they made the mistake on the handoff from the third leg to the fourth leg. So going into that final leg, they made a mistake, and the lady ran past they didn't get the exchange done. They didn't exchange the baton before the exchange line. So instead of just going ahead and passing the baton and going through, the lady on the fourth leg told her, hey, let's go back, and we're going to go back and get this right. So they went back, and they went back several times. And I was surprised at how many times that they went back to the actual exchange zone, and they kept messing it up. And the race was over pretty much, but they went ahead and finished the race, but they wanted to get it right. And I'm not sure exactly why they did it like that. I think they knew that they were going to be disqualified, so they wanted to just make sure that it was right. But it was almost as if they were practicing. They weren't running it like it was the final. And the only thing I could think of is if they were punished or something like that, if they were punished for doing it wrong. But I do know this for a fact. I do know that the other countries, when they medal, they get more money than the United States. The United States, out of all of the countries that are participating in track and field for the Olympics specifically Olympics, the other countries pay more money. Most other countries pay more money than the United States. I think the United States pay, I think it's 50,000 or it's 75,000. I have the breakdown, but I think it's 50,000 for the gold, and then it goes down for silver. I think it's 25, and then maybe 15 for bronze or something like that. Or maybe it starts at 75 and goes down. It's not 100,000 for the gold. It's not that much, but some of these other countries pay, a few pay over $100,000 for those. And then I think for a world record, you might get close to 100,000. I can't remember if that's country specific, but I think it's just worldwide. A world record garners a certain amount of money. I think it's 100,000 if I'm not mistaken. And then your country might give you a bonus on top of that. I think that's how that works. But there's definitely an amount of money exchange in there. But I want to thank Miss Watson. She brought that funny clip to me about the Chinese team. She mentioned that and she stated, "Hey, break this down because it's a really funny clip." But it was way longer than I anticipated it, or it was probably 30 seconds longer than I anticipated. But I do remember seeing a part of it, and I don't know why they kept doing it. I'm not sure why they did it like that, because that same thing happened. Sometimes the relay team will just stop, but the same thing happened with the men this year in the World Championships. I can't remember what country it was, but they were probably in lane 5 or 6, and they just stopped. Meaning the fourth leg, I don't think he didn't cross the line. He didn't continue to the finish line. Once they passed that line and he knew that they weren't going to make the exchange, they turned around and they just basically stopped. They didn't finish it. So I give that to the Chinese team, the ladies Chinese team in the 4x100. They finished the race, kind of like the guy that got injured years ago in the distance race, and his dad helped him over the finish line. But yeah, it was a particular country. I want to say it was in the finals this year for the World Championships, and it was in the finals or the semifinals, and that team, they just basically stopped because once he went past the line, I mean, it wasn't anything else you could do. I posted a clip of the 4x100 meter semifinals for this year, and it got a lot of attention. Several 100,000, I think 150,000 views on one platform on like Facebook, and then quite a bit on TikTok. But the point that I was making was when the second leg was coming to the third leg, so getting to the back, the curve on the back stretch, she went out a little bit too fast, meaning the person that was receiving the stick took off a little bit too fast. That's the way it looked. She took off a little bit too fast. And so the second leg had a problem getting it to her. So the third leg had to stutter step. And someone on there asked me what stutter step meant. You know what a stutter step is. When you get to some place, a point, and you stammer, if you see a hole or something, or you see something that you want to step around or something, you stammer your feet. And that's what she did, so she wouldn't cross the line, because once she crossed the line, it was going to be over. So that baton exchanged, it was only exchanged within that lane, that exchange zone, because the third leg had enough patience and thought to stutter step. Once she got close to that line, she stammered, and that means she totally slowed down. She got the stick, and then she continued to go. If it wasn't for that particular move, that meant that they wouldn't have made it to the finals. They won the gold medal this year. They would not have made it to the finals if she would have stepped over that line. She almost straddled the line. One more step and she would have been over it. But from what I was told, not the way that you were taught, but the way that I was told this year, the baton just can't move past the line. And you can't exchange it too early either. You can't exchange it before that exchange line or while you're in the acceleration line or in the acceleration zone. It has to be after the exchange zone line, and it has to be before the end of the exchange zone line. So it has to be after the beginning of the exchange zone line and before the end of the exchange zone line. So just so the actual baton is physically in there. Doesn't matter where your feet are at, but the way that you teach is probably not that in that order or in that manner, especially if you're teaching young students to do that, because if somebody goes a little bit too fast or you wait too long to say go, that means that extra step can put you over. That extra step can put the baton further than it needs to be. So you would teach, I would teach a young runner to get the baton to the other person with your feet inside the zone. That means if your feet are inside the zone and your body's inside the zone, then the baton is definitely inside the zone. But if your body goes over that line, that means it's questionable whether or not that baton is within that zone. Because basically, if your body is over, your arm is almost over as well once you reach back. And once you see it, you have to see it to really understand it. But think about it. Not every race that you're going to be placed in, especially high schoolers and middle schoolers, they're not all going to have that photo finish type of thing. Even some of these higher echelon places like Diamond Leagues and stuff, Diamond Leagues is going to have the photo finish. I would believe that each one of those does. But in some of these other invitationals and stuff, when you're going to, I'm not sure, Texas relays, Penn relays, I'm not sure. They might have it now, but they might not have photo finishes. So why would you leave it up to the eye in order to determine whether or not you are eligible, if your run was eligible? Because you don't have anything to look at. So I would keep it within that 20 meters. Keep the exchange within the 20 meters. Keep your bodies inside the exchange zone. Don't rely on someone else to decide whether or not the stick was over the line. Because once your body, if they see your feet are over the line, they're probably going to make a guess whether or not you had the stick before you passed that line. Before the stick passed the line, was it in the exchange zone? Was the stick in that exchange zone? But once, and everything's going so fast, and keep in mind, they don't have a person to watch every single runner. They don't have one person watching every single runner. That person that's judging has to make a guess across the board, except for when you have photo finishes and when you're replaying it. So this year in the World Championships, the United States really owed it to that third leg because she had the presence of mind to stutter step or stammer step before she crossed the line. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to put Sha'Carri Richardson in, and I believe it was one other person that ran in the finals that didn't run in the semifinals. They wouldn't have been able to make that exchange. They wouldn't have been able to run because they would have been disqualified. But I think Glamorous 50, for sending that clip for the Chinese team. It's pretty funny, but it just made me think what could be going through their minds that they had to make sure that this thing was correct. Was it just almost like an OCD thing, or was it something within the country? But that's a totally different thought process that we'll probably never know. But very interesting to watch. You should see that.